Picture this. It's a Tuesday morning. I'm walking into a glass-walled conference room on the 34th floor of a building I've never been inside before. The view behind me is the entire city, lit up, golden. The kind of backdrop you see in movies and think, no office actually looks like this. I'm wearing a charcoal suit I bought 3 months ago when I finally had the budget to own something that fit me properly. My shoes are new, my handshake is steady, and sitting across from me at that long oak table are 3 partners from one of the top consulting firms in the country asking me if I'd consider leading their newly formed division. I'm 32 years old. 2 years earlier, I was sitting in a different kind of office, smaller, fluorescent, eating a sad desk lunch while reading an email that told me, for the 4th time in 4 years, that someone else had been selected for the senior position I'd applied for. Someone with less time at the company than me, less experience, less results. And the reason my manager gave me, almost word for word each time, "We just don't think you're quite ready yet." I want you to hold that, because I held it for a long time. I turned it over and over in my hands like a stone, trying to figure out what was wrong with me, trying to figure out what ready even looked like, since no one would define it. And then, quietly, without any drama, without a single confrontation, I put the stone down. I didn't argue. I didn't send an angry email I'd regret. I didn't vent to HR. I didn't post about it on LinkedIn with vague, passive-aggressive energy. I just decided. And 18 months later, I walked out of that 34th floor conference room with an offer letter for a role that was, in title and compensation, 4 levels above where I'd been stuck. 4 levels in one jump. I didn't scream. I didn't fight back. I just became someone they never expected. This is that story. Welcome back. Or if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm glad you found this. This story isn't about revenge. I need you to understand that from the start, because revenge implies that your focus is still on them. And for most of this journey, I had to consciously, deliberately shift my focus away from the people who underestimated me and onto the only person whose opinion of me would actually matter in the long run, mine. This is a story about becoming, about what happens when you stop trying to prove something to other people and start building something for yourself. About the 18 months of silence, sacrifice, and staggeringly uncomfortable growth that nobody sees, until suddenly everyone does. If that's what you came for, you're in the right place. If this kind of story does something for you, if it gets you out of your head and into your own next chapter, hit subscribe. New stories go up every week, and I genuinely love for you to be part of this. All right, let's go back to the beginning. Let me tell you who I was before any of this happened. I grew up in a household where ambition was quietly discouraged. Not out of cruelty, out of protection. My parents had both worked hard, stable, safe jobs their entire lives. My dad was a mid-level accountant for the same regional firm for 27 years. My mom was an office administrator. They were good at what they did. They were never unemployed, never desperate. And the lesson they passed down, unspoken but constant, was don't get too big, don't reach too far. Security is the goal. I internalized that in ways I wouldn't understand until much later. When I graduated college with a business degree, I took the first decent paying job offered to me, operations analyst at a mid-sized logistics company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid $48,000 a year, it had health insurance, and it felt safe. My parents were proud. I told myself I was proud. And for the first 2 years, I was fine. I showed up, I did the work. I hit my targets. I got good performance reviews, the kind with words like reliable and conscientious and a solid contributor. I should have noticed even then that nobody was calling me a leader. Nobody was talking about my potential, but I didn't have the vocabulary for that yet. The first time I applied for a promotion was 26. The role was senior operations analyst. It was a natural next step. Most people in my position applied at around 2 to 3 years in. I had 2.5 years under my belt, a track record I was proud of, and what I genuinely believe was a strong case. My manager at the time, I'll call him Greg, sat me down for the feedback session, with the energy of a man who very much did not want to be having this conversation. He told me I was a great team member. He told me I brought a lot of value to the group. He told me the decision had been difficult. And then he told me they'd selected someone else, a guy who joined the team 8 months after me and had, by any metric I could point to, thinner results than I did. "We just don't think you're quite ready yet," Greg said. I nodded. I thanked him for his time. I walked back to my desk, put my headphones in, and stared at my screen for 45 minutes without doing a single thing. Ready. What did that mean? How do you get ready when no one will tell you what ready looks like? Is it a credential? Is it a personality type? Is it something about the way you walk into rooms, the way you speak, the way you take up space? I started watching, really watching. I paid attention to who got promoted, who got passed over, who got invited to certain meetings and who didn't. And I started to notice patterns that made me deeply uncomfortable. The people who moved up fastest weren't always the best at the technical work. Some of them were, sure, but a lot of them were just louder, more visible. They spoke up in meetings even when they didn't have anything new to add. They went to the after-work drinks. They had a certain comfortable familiarity with the senior leadership that I, the kid who'd grown up being told not to reach too far, didn't know how to cultivate. I told myself I'd figure it out. I told myself the work would speak for itself eventually. I applied again at year 3. Different role, same outcome. I applied again at year 4. Same outcome. And then at year 5. Year 5, I tried again. By this point, I had a new manager, a woman I'll call Sandra. Sandra had been brought in from outside the company to modernize the team, which in practice meant a lot of town halls about culture and alignment and a steady erosion of the informal systems that had made the team function. Sandra and I had a complicated relationship. I think, in another context, we might have gotten along fine. But from nearly the beginning, she seemed to have categorized me as someone who was resistant to change, which I think was her way of saying I was honest when I thought a new process wasn't working. I believed in the work too much to pretend a bad idea was a good one. She did not reward that quality in me. The 4th rejection was different from the others. The first 3 had at least felt like genuine business decisions, even if I disagreed with them. The 4th one felt personal. The role they gave it to was a guy who joined the company 14 months earlier. His name was Marcus. Marcus was charming, politically savvy, and genuinely, I'll give him this, very good at managing upward. He made Sandra feel smart. He made senior leadership feel seen. And his technical work was adequate. He had been at the company for 14 months. I had been there for 5 years. Sandra called me in to deliver the news herself. I remember exactly what she was wearing. A navy blazer, her hair pulled back. I remember the way she arranged her hands on the desk in front of her, as if she was preparing testimony. She said, "I want to be transparent with you because I think you deserve honesty." I already knew what was coming. "We've decided to go with Marcus for the role. He brings an energy, a presence that really fits where we're trying to take the team." And then she said the words that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Not because they hurt me, because they ultimately freed me. She said, "I think the ceiling for what you can achieve here in this company with your particular skill set and personality, I think that ceiling is real. And I wouldn't want you to spend the next 5 years chasing something that might not be in the cards for you." She was telling me I'd hit my limit at 28 years old at a mid-sized logistics company. She was telling me to stop trying. I don't know what my face did in that moment. I hope it stayed neutral. I hope I gave nothing away. I said, Thank you for being direct. I appreciate that. I shook her hand, I walked out. And I sat in my car in the parking garage for almost 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I want to be honest, there were moments in those 5 years when I absolutely did cry, alone, at home, questioning everything about myself. But in that parking garage, I didn't cry. Something else happened. Something got very, very quiet inside me. And that's when everything started to change. I want to be careful here because I think this part of the story is the one that gets distorted the most when people tell stories like mine. The narrative everyone wants is, she said that to me and I got furious, and that fury became fuel, and I set out to destroy her. That's not what happened. That's not what happened at all. What happened was, I went home. I made dinner. I went to bed. And I spent the next 2 weeks doing something I hadn't done in years. I thought, slowly, honestly, without the noise of the day job or the anxiety of the next application. I thought about what I actually wanted, not what would prove Sandra wrong, not what would make Greg regret his decisions, not what would put Marcus in his place. What did I want? It took me longer than I expected to answer that, because I realized I'd spent 5 years wanting things reactively. I'd wanted promotions because I felt like I deserved them, because I'd worked hard and the rules said hard work should be rewarded. But I'd never stopped to ask, what kind of work do I actually love? What kind of leader do I want to become? What does a life that I'm genuinely proud of look like? I didn't have clean answers, but for the first time, I was asking clean questions. I started journaling. I know how that sounds, but bear with me. I bought a plain black notebook from a drugstore and started writing every morning. Not affirmations, not manifestations, just honest inventory. What were my actual strengths? What were my real gaps? Where had I been telling myself stories that weren't serving me? One of the first things I wrote was, I think I've been waiting for permission. That hit me hard because it was true. I'd been waiting for Greg to tell me I was ready, for Sandra to validate me, for the company to confirm that my work had value, and none of them ever would. Not because my work lacked value, but because that's not how institutions work. Institutions optimize for what they need. They don't exist to recognize you. The recognition had to come from me first. So, here's what I decided, quietly, in the 3rd week after that parking garage moment. I was going to leave. Not immediately, not in a blaze of anger. I was going to leave strategically, on my timeline, when I was ready, genuinely, undeniably ready. And I was going to spend the next 18 months becoming that person. Now, I want to be very clear about something, because I think the gap between where I was and where I ended up might make this sound like a fairy tale. It was not a fairy tale. It was the hardest 18 months of my life. Month 1, I enrolled in a part-time operations and supply chain management certification program at a university about 40 minutes from my apartment. It cost me $4,200. I paid for it myself. It meant 2 nights a week of class after a full day of work. Every assignment completed on weekends. Every free hour redirected towards something that felt, initially, like trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon. I was exhausted, like genuinely, deeply exhausted. I'm not going to romanticize the grind for you. There were weeks where I ran on 5 hours of sleep and felt like I was held together with caffeine and stubbornness. There were Friday nights when my friends were at bars and I was at my kitchen table rereading a case study about supply chain disruption in pharmaceutical manufacturing. But here's what nobody tells you about that kind of exhaustion. It's a different quality than the exhaustion of stagnation. The exhaustion of stagnation feels like a slow drain, like something is being taken from you. The exhaustion of growth feels like a build, like you're putting weight on a bar that you can almost just barely lift. Month 3, I reached out to someone I'd been following on LinkedIn for over a year, a director-level operations executive who occasionally posted about leadership and process improvement. Her name was Diane. I'd never met her. I sent her a message that I rewrote 12 times, asking if she'd be open to a 30-minute call to share advice about transitioning into higher leadership in operations. She said yes. That call changed the trajectory of everything. In 30 minutes, Diane gave me a framework that Sandra had never given me in 5 years. She said, at the senior level, you stop being evaluated on whether you can do the work. Everyone at that table can do the work. You start being evaluated on whether you can see the whole board, strategy, people, risk, and possibility, all at once. Can you teach me to see what you see? That's the question. I wrote that down. I have it in my journal still. Can you teach me to see what you see? I didn't have that yet, but now I knew what I was building toward. Month 4, I started a private blog. Not public, I wasn't trying to build a brand, I was trying to build a brain. Every week, I wrote one analytical essay about a problem in my industry, a supply chain challenge, a market inefficiency, an operational case study I'd studied in my certification program. I wrote them like someone who was paid to think at a high level, even though nobody was paying me for that kind of thinking yet. I'd read somewhere that the fastest way to become an expert is to produce expert-level thinking repeatedly until your mind catches up to the output. So, I produced. Month 6, I landed my first outside consultation. A small e-commerce company, 8 employees, chaotic logistics, no real operational structure. A mutual connection introduced me. I did it on evenings and weekends. I charged $1,500 for a process audit and recommendations document. It wasn't about the money, it was about the proof. Proof to myself that someone outside the walls of that logistics company saw value in my thinking. They implemented 3 of my recommendations. Within 90 days, their fulfillment error rate dropped by 34%. I want you to feel the significance of that for a moment. The company I had no relationship with, no institutional standing in, no 5-year history at, they took my ideas and they worked. Sandra had told me my ceiling was real, but the world outside Sandra's office was an entirely different ceiling. Month 8, I got a second consultation, then a third. By month 10, I had a quiet, consistent side practice, generating about $2,000 to $3,000 a month, a portfolio of real results, and crucially, a growing network of people who knew me not as the guy who'd been passed over 4 times, but as a sharp, strategic operations thinker who got things done. I kept going to work every day. I kept doing my job well. I didn't phone it in, didn't become the person who mentally checked out and let the work slide, partly because that's just not who I am, and partly because I knew I needed the exit to be clean. I needed to leave with references, not drama. The hardest part of this whole period wasn't the workload, it was the silence. Nobody at the company knew what I was doing. Not my coworkers, not Greg, certainly not Sandra. I had to go to meetings, sit in reviews, smile through conversations about team priorities and development pathways, while quietly knowing that I was building a way out. There's a particular loneliness in that. Doing something significant that nobody around you can see. Knowing that the people who defined your limits don't know you've stopped accepting those limits. But I also learned something in that silence. Other people's perception of you has an extraordinary inertia. They will keep seeing what they've always seen, unless you radically change the context in which they see you. You can't change their perception inside the same walls. You have to change the walls. And that's when everything started to change. Month 12. I completed my operations and supply chain certification. I added it to my LinkedIn profile on a Sunday evening and then closed my laptop and went for a long walk. I didn't post about it, I didn't announce it. I just let it sit there, quietly, as a data point that now existed in the world. The next morning, I had 3 new LinkedIn connection requests from people I didn't know. 2 recruiters, 1 VP of operations at a company I recognized. I accepted all 3. The shift that happens when you genuinely start becoming more, it's not dramatic. It doesn't arrive like a thunderclap. It seeps in. You notice it first in small moments of confidence you didn't have before. The way you sit in a meeting and feel your own competence like something solid in your chest. The way you speak, not louder, but clearer because you're no longer afraid to take up space with a half-formed idea. You've been thinking too much, too rigorously to have half-formed ideas anymore. Diane had become a genuine mentor by this point. We spoke monthly, she started introducing me to people in her network, and she said something to me around month 11 that I think about often. She said, "You've stopped asking for permission in the way you talk. I don't know when that happened, but something changed." I knew when it happened. It happened the day I decided the walls were mine to change. Month 13. One of the VPs at my company, not my direct chain, but a senior leader I'd interacted with on cross-functional projects, stopped me in the hallway and said, "Hey, I saw you completed that certification. That's impressive. We should grab coffee sometime." He'd never initiated a conversation with me before, not once in 3 years. I smiled. I said, "I'd like that." And then I walked away thinking, where was this version of this conversation 4 years ago? But I wasn't bitter. I want to be clear about that, because bitterness is a trap I actively refused. The thing about bitterness is it feels righteous. It feels like it's protecting you. But all it's actually doing is keeping your attention on the past, and your attention is the most finite, precious resource you have. I needed all of my attention on the future. Month 14, I started speaking. Nothing huge, a local professional development meetup, about 60 people, on the topic of operational efficiency in small to mid-sized businesses. I was terrified. I rehearsed for 11 days. I wrote out my whole talk and then deliberately memorized only the key points, because I'd learned that reading a script feels different to an audience than speaking from command of material. The talk went well. Not perfectly. I stumbled on a transition in the middle, went 2 minutes long, and forgot to mention one of my best case study points. But the response afterward was what mattered. 6 people came up to me individually. 2 gave me their cards. 1 asked if I did consulting work. I said yes, because I did. Here's the invisible transformation that I think is actually the most important one, and it's the hardest to articulate. I stopped needing external validation to feel legitimate. That sounds simple. It is not simple. For years, my sense of my own value had been tethered to what my company told me I was worth. When they said not quite ready, I felt not ready. When they chose someone else, I questioned myself. My internal calibration was completely outsourced to an institution that had its own politics, its own biases, its own agenda. The 18 months of building something independently, the certifications, the consulting work, the writing, the speaking, slowly, steadily recalibrated me. Because every time a client paid me, every time a recommendation I made actually worked, every time someone I'd never met chose to take my call over someone else's, that was data, real-world data outside the walls, untainted by organizational politics. And that data told a very different story than Sandra's story. Month 15, I updated my resume for the first time in 4 years. I sat down with a blank document and listed honestly and specifically what I'd built: the certifications, the consulting work, the specific results, fulfillment error rates, cost reductions, process timelines, the speaking, the mentorship I'd been receiving from a director-level executive. I looked at that document and felt, for the first time, that it didn't look like the resume of the guy Sandra had told to manage his expectations. It looked like the resume of someone ready. Not Sandra's definition of ready, my definition, built on evidence. Month 16, I started quietly, selectively applying, not frantically. I was strategic. I identified companies where my particular combination of skills and experience could command a senior role. I wasn't applying for the same level I'd been stuck at. I was applying for operations manager roles, director of operations roles, positions that were 3 and 4 levels above where I sat. I told myself, if they say no, I'll learn why and adjust. If they say yes, then Sandra was wrong. The first round of interviews was clarifying. I got some no's. I'm not going to skip over that. One company rejected me after the first round. Another got to the final round and chose an external candidate with more years of experience. Both of those rejections stung, but they stung differently than the ones at the old company, because these decisions came from people who didn't have a preconceived story about me. They were evaluating me fresh, and if I wasn't landing, it meant something specific was missing from my presentation, not from my personhood. I asked for feedback. I got it. I adjusted. And that's when everything started to change. Month 17, I had 7 interviews in 4 weeks across 3 different companies. I was tired, but electric. The kind of tired that doesn't feel like depletion, it feels like momentum. I had learned how to talk about my work at a level I'd never been able to before. I could articulate strategy. I could speak to outcomes with specificity. I could describe my consulting work in a way that demonstrated exactly the kind of seeing the whole board capability that Diane had described. One of those 7 interviews was with the partners on the 34th floor. They found me through LinkedIn. A recruiter had reached out, connected to one of the contacts in Diane's network who'd seen me speak. The role they were building was for a division lead for operations strategy, essentially a director-level seat at a growing division of the firm, building a team from scratch, responsible for client delivery, internal operations, and eventually P&L. It was 4 levels above where I'd been stuck. I want to be honest. I walked into that first conversation with those partners absolutely terrified. Not because I wasn't ready, because I was finally ready. And being ready meant I had something to lose. But here's what I noticed in that room. I didn't shrink. That was new. The version of me who'd been told his ceiling was real, that version would have shrunk in that room, would have deferred constantly, apologized for taking up space, qualified every strong statement with, "But of course, that's just my perspective." Instead, I sat forward. I asked them questions, good ones, the kind that showed I thought about their business, their challenges, their market position. When they pushed back on one of my points about their current operational model, I held my ground, explained my reasoning, and acknowledged the nuance in their counterpoint, without backing down to the core of what I believed. After the 3rd interview, the lead partner called me directly to make the offer. He said, and I'll never forget this, "We've interviewed 11 people for this role over the past 3 months. You were the most prepared person we spoke to, not just technically, strategically. You understand how to see the whole board." Diane's words in someone else's mouth, across the table from me, in an offer letter. The base salary was $162,000, plus performance bonus, equity options, and a full relocation allowance. It was more than 3 times what I'd been making. I accepted on the spot. I gave my notice on a Monday morning. I had written out what I was going to say 100 times, but in the moment, I kept it simple. I went to Sandra's office, knocked, sat down across from her, and said, "I've accepted a position with another organization. My last day will be in 2 weeks." She blinked, then she said, "Oh, can I ask where you're going?" I told her the firm. Her expression was something I had not entirely anticipated. It wasn't anger, it wasn't indifference. It was a kind of recalibration. Like a math equation she'd been sure of suddenly coming out wrong, and her face processing the error in real time. "That's a significant firm," she said. "It is," I said. "I'm excited about it." There was a pause, a long one, and then she said, "What role?" "Division lead for operations strategy." Another pause. "That's impressive. Congratulations." And I said, "Thank you." I stood up, I shook her hand, and I walked out. That was it. No confrontation, no list of grievances read aloud, no dramatic moment where I itemized the 4 rejections, no speech, no satisfaction of watching her realize she'd been wrong. Because honestly, by the time I sat across from her in that office, I had so thoroughly moved on that the moment felt less like victory and more like completion. Like closing a chapter in a book you'd already emotionally finished weeks ago. People always ask me, didn't you want to say something? Didn't you want her to understand what she'd done? Here's the truth. Not really. Not anymore. What I had wanted for years was her recognition, her validation, her acknowledgement that I was capable. But by the time I had the offer letter in my hand, I no longer needed her to know anything. I had built something real. It existed in the world. It didn't need her blessing to be real. The proof wasn't in the confrontation. The proof was in the offer letter. The 2 weeks of notice were interesting. Word spreads fast in a mid-sized company. By day 2, people I hadn't spoken to in months were stopping by my desk to congratulate me. Some of them were genuinely warm. People I'd worked alongside for years who I genuinely liked, who seemed truly happy for me. Those conversations meant a lot. Others were different. Marcus, yes, the guy who'd gotten the promotion I'd wanted at year 5, sent me a LinkedIn message 3 days after I'd given notice. It said, "Hey, just heard the news, congrats. I've actually been thinking about making a move myself. Would love to grab coffee and chat about your experience over there and any contacts you might be able to share." I stared at that message for a long time. Marcus, who had leapfrogged me with 14 months of tenure, was now asking me for contacts? I thought about what to say. I thought about the version of me who would have felt smug writing a particular kind of response, and then I thought about the version of me I was actively becoming. I wrote back, "Congrats on everything here. Best of luck with whatever's next for you," and left it at that. Not coldness, not pettiness, just clean edges. I wished him no harm. I also owed him nothing. The interaction that has stayed with me most, though, wasn't with Sandra or Marcus. It was with Greg. Greg, my first manager, the one who told me not quite ready for the very first time, had moved to a different department years earlier, but he was still at the company. He found me in the kitchen on my second to last day. He said, "I heard you're heading to the firm. That's huge. Division lead, right?" That's right. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something I genuinely didn't expect. "I owe you an apology." I didn't say anything. I just waited. He said, "When you applied for that first senior role back in year 3, I thought you weren't political enough, that you cared too much about the work and not enough about the game. I thought that was a ceiling. I was wrong. That's kind of exactly what those firms want." I looked at him, and I felt, not vindication exactly, not the hot rush of being right and everyone knows it, something quieter, something almost like sadness on his behalf, for all the years he'd operated under a definition of ready that had more to do with conformity than capability. I said, "I appreciate that, genuinely, and for what it's worth, this company gave me a lot. I learned things here I needed to learn." That was true. Even the painful parts had taught me something. We shook hands, he wished me well, and I left the kitchen with a feeling I'd been told was supposed to feel like triumph, but actually felt like peace. My last day, I packed a single box, walked through the building one more time, said goodbye to the people I meant it with, dropped my badge at reception, drove to the parking garage, got in my car, and this time, sitting in that concrete structure, I didn't feel hollowed out. I didn't feel like I needed 20 minutes to reconstruct myself before I could drive. I felt like someone who was exactly where they were supposed to be, headed somewhere they had built, on their own timeline, on their own terms. 3 months later, I was leading a team of 11, working on projects with companies whose names I'd only ever seen in business school case studies, sitting in rooms where the conversations moved at a speed that a year and a half earlier I wouldn't have been ready for. Now, I was ready. Not because Sandra had finally decided I was, not because Greg had revised his assessment, because I had built it, brick by brick, night by night, with a black notebook and a certification program and a terrifying LinkedIn message to a woman named Diane who, thank God, said yes. A year after I left, I heard through a mutual connection that Sandra had left the company. The culture modernization initiative had not gone the way leadership hoped, and there had been some restructuring. I didn't feel satisfaction at this. I want to be honest about that. I heard it and I felt nothing particularly strong. By that point, she was a character in a chapter I'd closed. What happened in her story was her story. Mine was already 6 chapters ahead. About 14 months into the new role, I was at an industry conference. Large event, a couple thousand people, multiple tracks, the kind of conference where you spend half your time in hallways and coffee lines because that's where the real conversations happen. I was presenting on a panel, my first time speaking at a major industry conference on operational resilience and organizational design. After the panel, I was standing near the coffee station when I saw across the room someone I hadn't expected, a former colleague from the old company, someone who'd been in my orbit during the years I'd been passed over. Not a close friend, but someone who'd watched the rejections happen, who'd been kind enough about it, but never particularly in my corner. He spotted me, made his way over, and the look on his face was something I'll carry for a long time. Not contempt, not fake warmth, just honest astonishment. "You were just on that panel," he said. "I was," I said. "And you're at the firm now?" "Yup." He shook his head, slowly. "That's incredible, man. I mean, that's genuinely incredible. What happened?" And here's the thing. In that moment, with all the context of the previous 2+ years, with everything I'd built and learned and survived, I had a choice about what story I told him. I could have said, "What happened is that Sandra told me I'd hit my ceiling, so I went out and proved her completely and utterly wrong." That would have felt good for about 4 seconds. Instead, I said, "I decided what I actually wanted and went and built it." He nodded. "That simple?" "That hard," I said, "but yeah." We chatted for a few more minutes. He told me things were fine at the old company. I told him I hoped they stayed that way. We parted with a handshake, and I went back to my table, ordered another coffee, and thought about the panel I'd just come off of, the client meeting I had the next morning, the team member I needed to give a development conversation to, the research I'd been reading on supply chain resilience. I thought about almost none of what had just transpired in that conversation, because it wasn't really about him. It wasn't really about Sandra or Greg or Marcus or the 4 years of parking garage silences. It had never been about them. And that realization, sitting there with a conference badge and a quiet cup of coffee and a full, demanding, extraordinary life ahead of me, that was the real moment I knew I'd won. Not the offer letter, not the salary, not the panel. The moment I realized I'd stopped keeping score, that's when everything had truly changed. I want to end with something honest. I've told you the story in a way that probably sounds, in places, more linear than it was. I've given you months and milestones and clean narrative beats. In real life, there were weeks where none of it felt like it was working. Weeks where the certification felt pointless, the consulting work felt too small, the journaling felt like just writing complaints in a more organized format. There were moments where I almost went back, not to the job, but to the smaller version of myself, where I almost let the story Sandra told about me become the story I told about me. I didn't, but it was never automatic. The best revenge is living well. You've probably heard that. It's a good line. But I want to update it slightly because I think it misses something. The best revenge is living well, but only if you're doing it for yourself. If you build something beautiful just to prove someone wrong, you'll find that the moment you've proven them wrong, the beauty means nothing. The achievement is hollow because it was never really yours. It was just a response to theirs. But if you build something because you finally, genuinely decided what you wanted for yourself, because you got quiet enough to hear your own voice and honest enough to follow it, then whether or not the person who doubted you ever knows about it, you'll know. And that knowledge is not small. That knowledge is the whole game. Here's what I leave you with, practically, if you're in your parking garage moment right now. 1. Get quiet before you get even. The most important decision you'll make isn't the dramatic one. It's the quiet one, alone. When you ask yourself what you actually want. 2. Build outside the walls that have limited you. Your employer, your family, your city, your old identity, they all have a pre-written story about who you are. The only way to change that story is to write something new outside their walls and then let the evidence speak. 3. Find one Diane. One person outside your current context who sees what you could be and will tell you honestly what it takes to get there. One conversation like that is worth 4 years of performance reviews. 4. Do the work in silence. Not because silence is strategic, though it is, but because the work itself is the point. Every hour you spend explaining what you're doing is an hour you could spend doing it. 5. Let go of the score. The moment you stop keeping count of who wronged you and who owes you what, that's the moment the transformation is complete. That's the moment you're free. I still have that black notebook, the first one from the drugstore. The pages are wavy now from humidity and some of the ink is smeared, but I can still read the first thing I wrote in it. I think I've been waiting for permission. Underneath that, a week later, I wrote one more line, the permission I finally gave myself. Go. That's it. That's the whole story. Now it's your turn. What's your glow-up story? What's the parking garage moment you're sitting in right now, or the one you came out of? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one of them, because these stories matter. Yours matters. And if this video gave you something today, hit subscribe. Stay with me. There's a lot more story left to tell.